This is TWiT.
I was on the web the other day doing the hunt before iOS today.
Yeah.
And I went to one of my favorite sites to go to when I'm looking for news for iOS today. And it was 9to5Mac.
Of course.
And what did I see but every possible thing there was to learn about iOS 14, the next iPhones, iPads, etc.
Dang.
And so I'm very excited to have Zac Hall here of 9to5Mac to talk to us all about it. Welcome, Zac.
Hey, welcome. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course.
You can welcome us too. It's cool. It's cool.
Welcome.
We feel welcome in your presence as well.
So I think the most important thing that we should start out with is people will want to know, where does this news that you are sharing, where does it come from? Because this is one of those situations where, Apple is maybe going to be holding a WWDC conference, whether it's an in-person conference or a remote conference, it doesn't matter. That's when those announcements kind of happen. And yet we have learned by learning from you, learning that iOS 14 has all of this code and stuff in it. So talk to us about how this process works, how you've discovered all of this stuff.
Sure. It's a little bit of stuff from the future, and that it's iOS 14 and watchOS 7 and unreleased devices, but it's also from the past a little bit too, because now we're in mid-March and everything that we are looking at is based probably in around December. And it also, something this all includes is something that's been reported from Mark Gurman at Bloomberg, which is the ability for Apple to turn features on and off as development, the cycle goes on. Mm-hmm. So if something is not ready yet, they can turn it off. It's in the code maybe, or maybe they hide it from the code, but it won't be consumer facing. It won't be in the public or developer betas. So it kind of puts a big disclaimer on everything that we're looking at, which is this is in development. That's the context, but that they could obviously flag anything and remove it before iOS or iOS 14 and watchOS 7 if they wanted to. Which is based on last year's experience with some unfinished features being in the iOS 13 beta, then being pulled before the beta process ended and only returning in like iOS 13.2, 3, and 4. So it's all subject to change, but it's all in development. Even if we don't know exactly when it will come out. The context though is this is intended for iOS 14 this fall and watchOS 7.
Gotcha. So let's talk hardware. We'll just go down the line. iPhone 9. This is a device that exists someplace between iPhone 8 and iPhone 10, 11, etc. What is this device, and sort of what did you discover? And by you, it's sort of the royal you. It's the 9to5Mac as a whole. What was discovered about the iPhone 9?
Yeah, we've got enough information that it would be nearly impossible for one person to write all of the coverage for this. So we're lucky and fortunate in that we've got a great team at 9to5Mac that's experienced and capable of ciphering through information and finding the story around it. For iPhone 9, the story there, whatever they end up calling it, 9 or SC2 or anything else, it's to replace I guess it was the iPhone 5 replacement, 5S replacement, that was the SE. Mm-hmm. Only this time it will replace the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus in the lineup. And it seems like a pretty good deal where you've got the ability to pay for, maybe around the same price or maybe even a little bit less than the iPhone 8. And then you get the chip of newer hardware. So it will age better. And it's a better deal probably now than just buying the iPhone 8 and 8 Plus. Some things about it will have, it won't be as modern as an iPhone 11, of course. It wouldn't be possible price-wise. But we do expect there to be some nice features that aren't in other iPhones, like older iPhones, like the ability to have Express Transit, where you can sort of wave your iPhone without having to unlock with Face ID. And that makes, using Apple Pay in public places like the, underground tunnel, and those are much easier to do, and you don't have to unlock it with your face. You just kind of wave it, so it's great.
Yeah, and I think too, it can sometimes work where even if you are running very low on battery, your battery runs out, that information is still sort of held in the chip so that you can pay for your transit, which is nice.
Yeah,
that's right. There's like an unseen amount of battery that is held on for that purpose, right?
I just wanted to throw in here real quick. I was super confused because I was like, iPhone 9, wait a minute, didn't that already come out? Because I'm Android. Like, I've been Android for years and years and years. I completely forgot that Apple skipped over the 9 to go to the 10 And so it's kind of like they're going back in time.
Yeah.
And they're like, actually, let's have one there too.
They said 9 to the 9, and
Right.
now they're doing it. So,
Which is exactly what Windows did with Windows 8 to Windows 10.
right?
And exactly what Samsung did, jumping to the S20, right? Like it's
Yeah,
in
it's a lot
vogue
of
right
numbers
now
there.
to jump ahead.
In fact,
Yeah, and I'm hesitant to say iPhone 9 for certain because, for one, marketing names are very tightly secured, more than code, which you think would be tightly secured. But also, in the people that I do talk to that are Android users, they'll often say 9. We're on 11. Like, what is it you're talking about? And so I think there are aspects about it that could be better than 10 and 10s and have features from 11. So it could be some variant of 11, or it could just be SE or something else. So we'll see.
oh golly, the iPhone 11 SE2 Pro.
Oh,
Max, yeah. So iPad Pro, there's certainly entry in the code for the iPad Pro, but one of the things that it may get is the most recent camera. That this has kind of been a thing where iPads of yonder have not included the camera that you get, the camera array that you get on an iPhone. Are we looking at a camera that's going to be more in line with the next version of the iPhone as well?
Yeah, possibly better. I mean, the big thing for iPad camera right now is, there's an expectation that it will go from one to multiple cameras, matching some of the features of newer iPhones. There's also the idea of what's called like a time to flight sensor. So the idea there is it works sort of like the front camera on the iPhone and the iPad Pro currently, where you've got multiple sensors, and so it can determine the depth behind you and take some things that way. So the idea there is that will probably come to the iPhone 12 this year. If the iPad Pro comes before that, it could come to the iPad before the iPhone, which is similar to what we may expect for 5G. And that, it's kind of leave it up to the imagination to figure out what you can do with that. I saw one rumor was maybe you could capture 2 images in one and change the focus in between. If you take a picture like of a dog up close or a baby and it ends up being out of focus, maybe you could shift the focus because you've captured both the far away and the up close, which is a feature that we've kind of wanted on the iPhone for several years now. There was that Leica camera that could do that. Mm-hmm. And maybe that'll be there. And then it's also one of those things where just the hardware, might have AR kit implementations, and we'll just have to see what we get and see what people do with it.
Cool. Well, and here's the big one for you. Apple Watch Series 6. What are we looking at? And let's not just talk hardware. Basically everything with the Series 6 with watchOS 7. And maybe you can explain to me what the heck a tachymeter is, because I still don't know how that works or what it does.
I do love the Apple Watch. 9to5Mac Watch Time is my every other week Apple Watch podcast. We're releasing an episode today with Casey Liss, so it's a great interview.
Oh, fun.
For the watchOS and Apple Watch Series 6 stuff, at a high level, the hardware we expect to it will be required for sleep tracking, and Apple's been working on built-in sleep tracking since they bought Beddit a few years ago.
Yeah.
They've even leaked their sleep app last year by accident. There's a lot more code that we've discovered in previous cycles and even now that suggests, how it will work with battery and everything and be very featured. The other thing is the ability for the Series 7 or Series 6 probably to have a new sensor that allows you to take to measure blood oxygen saturation. And if you hit a high level of that or a lower level of that below 95, especially below 80, you can have heart problems or even brain problems. And so the key there is not only will be able to read that, but give you an alert if it drops below a certain threshold so that you can be aware of what's going on and seek medical attention, which is very similar to heart rate alerts where you can measure your heart rate anytime, but you can also opt to receive an alert if it's too low or too high, just out of the ordinary. So that'll be very cool. It's something that's been rumored since the first teardown of the first generation Apple Watch. But it's never been turned on, and it may be that there was something lacking there for approval for existing hardware, and that new hardware will have whatever they needed before to do that. And I think that'll be a pretty big deal. And then the new Infograph Pro watch face, we've got Infograph and Infograph Modular so far since Series 4 and 5, and the new thing seems to be Infograph Pro. And like you said, the tachometer or tachometer or however you say it, I had to learn. I haven't quite figured it out yet.
Yeah.
Will be this way of it's from the analog watch world, and so it's like it's around the dial, and you've got it's a way to measure like speed and distance over a certain period of time. So it's a very analog way of doing things, like a slide ruler, for example. But it's it's sort of a stylistic thing from the analog watch world too, even if it's not super practical. And my hope is that maybe with the infograph face, with this being on there, there'll be some other digital smarter way of using it. So it won't just be an analog to analog parallel, but it'll have some digital enhancements. Sort of like you've got the stopwatch, and you can make it look analog, digital, hybrid a number of ways, and do different things with it being a smartwatch. So we hope this is the same case here.
Yeah, that would be nice. I'm kind of excited, not for myself, because last I checked, they don't make Apple Watches for dogs, but I think that the Apple Watch for kids stuff is really interesting. So a parent can pair their kid's Apple Watch to their phone and control things like school time. So between a certain time of day, the Apple Watch can only do certain communications or only certain complications work. Because I think the problem right now is, I can remember when I was a kid, big nerd, still am, but was especially in school, and I got a calculator watch. And I remember being in class and some of my colleagues complaining that I had a calculator watch because they were, oh, he's going to cheat on the test.
Unfair.
And the teacher, because I'm the teacher's pet, trusted me not to use it. But with school time and something like that, then, you can let your kids have these devices, and then if it became a problem with the schools, the principal or whatever, then you could say, well, look, these apps aren't available to the kids during school. Okay. I'm using this as a means of communication to make sure that my kid is safe, that kind of thing. So I think that's a pretty cool feature.
The timing on that feature alone is really interesting, because we know that this information is based on development that was happening in December. Around Christmas last year on our 9to5Mac Happy Hour podcast with my co-host Benjamin Mayo, I was looking at getting my daughter, who is now 7, she was 6 at the time, an Apple Watch, because she goes and plays in the neighborhood and rides her bike, and I want to know where she is and know for her that she can come home by sunset and know what sunset time is. And so, being the Apple Watch nerd that I am, you got to have an iPhone for that, and it can't be your parents' iPhone. It's got to be an iPhone with the kid's account on it. So what I did was, I did buy an iPhone, but I didn't let her have it yet. I saved it for Christmas, and we gave her the watch immediately, so we could know where she is with location sharing. And it was a deal too, where like the Series 3 and 38 with cellular cost the amount of without cellular.
Oh, nice.
So it was a really nice thing. But two things happened. Of course, she didn't know she had to have an iPhone, but she was aware that she could ping it from the control center. Oh,
wow.
And so, she suspected it, and then for Christmas she received it. In a perfect world, like maybe without watchOS 7, I wouldn't even do the iPhone at all, and it would just be the watch, because it's limited enough that she really can't get in trouble. But even still, at school, she was required to put it in her backpack.
Oh, wow.
So I'm still able to see, like, when she makes it to school and when she leaves, based on the Apple Watch, but she can't wear it. And so I imagine that's a pretty big deal at a lot of schools, not just hers. And so this feature will be great for parents like me who, bought an iPhone. I guess now it's too late, but in the future, like for my younger son, he's 2, like when he gets of age, and just buy him an Apple Watch, maybe even a secondhand one that I've collected, and not have to have an iPhone in the mix, which would be wonderful, because you've got the Apple Watch data for cellular plus the data for the phone. And this is, this can streamline that process a lot for parents. And I was openly requesting this feature on November and December. So it's really neat to see. It was probably thought up by then and in progress. So